And the next presentation, with the Inmaculada Plasencia. She's a senior expert in the Disability and Inclusion Unit of the General Directorate of Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission. Yeah. I pass you the floor, Inmaculada.
Okay. So thank you very much. Let me start by saying that we are really happy to see that this project is coming to a good end, that a lot of information has been collected, that it has clarified some of the challenges that are, or has confirmed, I could better say, some of the challenges that we face, that Europe face, to ensure accessibility. I have not been able to be here this morning, but I've heard that you had also very rich debates and presentations. Now, there are a couple of things I would like to say about the approach to accessibility and why this project was selected. Because we have been investing a lot in setting up that ecosystem that some of you talked about it. We did set up an ecosystem of accessibility requirements in policy and legislation in Europe. We have several pieces of legislation, the Accessibility Act, the Web Directive, audiovisual media, electronic communications, electronic signatures. There are more and more accessibility legislation that contains strong accessibility provisions. And for example, what we're doing now, you will see it in some of the recent Commission proposals, is really also mainstream accessibility obligations in sectors. For example, access to justice. Justice is going digital. And you will see that more and more accessibility plays a feature. Plays a role in that digitalization of justice. And we need to go further. You had an example about healthcare, but this is just one of them. We need to really do more. We have standards. We will have even more standards to facilitate the work. But I would like to say that the approach, the way we see accessibility is just a tool. And it's just a tool, one of the tools to reach the objective or the right of persons with disabilities for equal access. Accessibility serves a purpose, it's not an end in itself. And it has to go hand in hand with assistive technology. We really need to find solutions that work well for the general public, for a large part of the population, using design for all approaches, but at the end, we also need to be sure that they interoperate well and that they work well with assistive technology. This is, by the way, a requirement of the Accessibility Act. It, I think, is really very innovative because it's one of the very few pieces of legislation around the world that requires this interoperability with assistive technology. So now we have legislation, policies, standards. What do we miss? Well, a lot has been said that confirms also some of the results of the project. We need implementation, and we need to invest more in making sure that implementation really happens. And several elements remain crucial to achieve that implementation. We need still more awareness. Still, people do not know about the needs of persons with disabilities, and in areas where you would be surprised, where you would expect that people would be implementing accessibility, they have not yet heard about accessibility even. So we need more awareness, we need more training. Certainly, we need more training, we need more competencies, we need to have communities that talk and work on accessibility. We have it in some sectors. I think in the area of the web, this is, for example, more developed and is permeating more the mainstream professionals on accessibility. The mainstream professionals on the web. In other sectors, it's much more difficult. It's not happening yet. Not to mention that we have three different worlds: ICT, built environment, transport, where you have 3 communities working on accessibility that they don't even know each other for a large extent. And we see technology permeating in the built environment. Someone mentioned today environmental controllers, or even for temperature. And well, I mean, as I was saying, I said to the colleague who was sitting beside, the majority of elderly people cannot read, cannot program, not measure, but cannot read, cannot even see the digital display, but they cannot even read the manual mechanic thing. They don't use it. They cannot program the night and day because they are so difficult to use and so little accessible. So we need to make sure that we have competent people that work on those 3 areas, that come together, and that they also permeate all these fields, environmental field, transport field, in more detail. But we also need to reach competence, to enhance competence in another set of professionals. And those are enforcement professionals. I really get sad when I hear reference to legislation like, okay, well, it's a piece of paper, nobody, you know, at the end of the day, you just, it doesn't change the world. I think it does change the world. And we have seen it, for example, the impact that the Web Accessibility Directive has had in the communities of web developers, webmasters. They talk about it now, and they start to get more competencies in the area. Without the directive, I don't think that would have happened. I think it would be very difficult to happen. And when you have legislation, when you have policies, you have to have an enforcement policy. It's true, that of ticking the box. If the legislation is weak, if it doesn't have enforcement, basically at the end you don't comply and nothing happens. That's true, and that is what we need to avoid. And that's why the Accessibility Act contains strong enforcement provisions. But enforcement provisions that give the power to the user, to the consumer. This is really important to realize. Without those enforcement provisions, the consumer can write to those that are trespassing the law, not complying with the law. I'm not judging whether it is for just they didn't know, they have goodwill, but they didn't manage. I'm not judging, and I don't pass any judgment. But the fact is that when you are confronted with a product, with a service, with a website, with an infrastructure that is not accessible, if the only thing that the consumer can do is to knock the door of those people and ask, please, could you please change it? It's not enough. Well, the proof that it is not enough is the lack of accessibility, because users have been doing this for a long time. And I'm not talking only to the private sector, but also to us, the public sector. We get a lot of, and all the ministries at national level, public authorities, local authorities, get a lot of calls of disabled people telling, please fix your tools, your websites, your venues, they are not accessible. So we need something more. We need encouragement, we need the competence, but we need also to make sure we have a window of opportunity, which is these enforcement bodies. We need to invest in them. They need to have more clear competencies in this area so that when they get the complaints, they can act. I really think that that is important. Of course, we need to accompany this, and we are working already on this, and we have good basis for further development and positive actions. We have procurement, it's compulsory now, so, you know, it's compulsory in Europe to buy accessible, so we hope that people will comply with it, yeah? Yet another pointed to the enforcement. We have awareness, we have also to recognize and to reward those that comply with accessibility. I mean, we have the Access City Award that does it with cities, but more and more we need to make sure that we have a good recognition in all the areas. Awards could be a way, but could be others. But really, those that fulfill, those that are even going beyond the law, which we very much welcome, should be recognized and rewarded. The myth of the cost has been mentioned, that it is not costly. Well, there I would like to have a reflection and invite all of you to provide us with information if you have it. We have two myths. The myth that is cheap and the myth that is expensive. It's not only the myth that is expensive that is there. The myth that is cheap is really very little substantiated with quantitative cost data. So we need realistic cost data. We need more information about cost, both sides. And there can be things that are difficult and there are things that are more easy. But we need to document that. It is really very, very important. So with this project, I consider the end of this project just a step in this way forward towards implementation. Data has been gathered, information, projects have been identified, a methodology for identify projects that have good work on accessibility is there. We have got some key documentation that can be shared to facilitate the implementation of accessibility. And what's the next step? Well, as many of you know, we have launched in January this year the Accessible EU Center. It is a work that will be operational for the next in the next years as a service to the Commission, because we want to support and facilitate the implementation of accessibility. We want to support all those actors, those communities, and it needs to start by creating those communities. We need to enhance communities of practices. We need to identify professionals. We need to train. We need to gather better information, and we need to do this at European level, of course, but mostly at national and local level. We need, with this Accessible EU work that is ahead of us, we will have trainings, meetings, material at national level to be shared and to create these communities that we need to make accessibility a reality. So with those forward-looking words, I leave you. I thank you, all of you, for your attention. I thank the participants of the project. I will not mention all of them because it's quite a big consortium, but I hope that the tools, the solutions, the information that you have gathered will be widely used, and that it will be really well disseminated. Those tools are set for public domain. Many of them, the information is on the web. So all I can wish is a good use of what this project has managed to achieve, and that this community will continue to be enlarged in the future work on Accessible EU and participate in future work. Thank you.